think we'll give it another minute and then we'll begin if that's fine. Wonderful. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but we're glad people were able to find a link and join us. So welcome to APSA's first interactive session of the 2021-2022 academic year. We're super excited to host tonight's session with our current students, our amazing panelists, to answer some general questions that people might have about the MD, DO, PhD application process. So we'll go ahead and start with introductions. We'll have the panelists introduce themselves briefly. Jerome, would you like to go first?
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Jerome Arsenault. I am a 7th year MD PhD student, so I am in the 5th year of grad school. I am a student at Meharry Medical College, but I conduct my research in Rebecca Erie's lab at Vanderbilt University. And my research is using imaging mass cytometry to elucidate the composition and organization of tissue samples from patients with intractable epilepsy due to various mutations in the mTOR pathway.
Maya, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Maya Blake. I am a DO PhD student at Michigan State University. And I am a 5th year, entering 5th year. So we do things a little differently than the classic MD PhD programs, but I'm currently in my 3rd year of grad school, sorry. And my research is in applied immunology and specifically how genetic polymorphisms increase susceptibility to multiple sclerosis, and then ways that we can use the immune system to better treat the disease. And when I'm done, I would like to pursue pediatric oncology.
I think I'm next, yes? Okay, so my name is Ike Chinura. I am currently a 5th year MD PhD student at the University of Arizona in Tucson. On my 3rd year clerkships now. And yeah, I studied in my PhD, I studied the mechanisms or underpinnings of reentrant ventricular tachycardia and reentrant arrhythmias, and evaluated novel biomaterial interventions that hopefully one day will serve as adjuncts to pharmacokinetic therapies and ablation, radiofrequency, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, happy to answer any questions. Thanks for having me.
Hi, I think I'm next. My name is Maria Hudak. I am a current 3rd year MD PhD, which means I'm just about to start in my lab. I'm super excited about it. I'm at Columbia, and I am going to start my work in lung tissue engineering, although I have an interest in tissue engineering more broadly. But I'm super excited about this lung project. And my clinical interests are neurology and oncology.
Hi, my name is Molly. I am a 7th year MD PhD student at Oregon Health and Science University. I did my PhD in behavioral and systems neuroscience, looking at the intergenerational transmission of childhood maltreatment using neuroimaging. And I'm currently an M3, so back on the wards, thinking that I'm probably going to apply into child and adolescent psychiatry.
Wonderful. So thank you all for introducing yourselves. And most importantly, thank you all for being here. We're super grateful that all of you took the time out of what I'm sure is your very busy day to join us here, to give us some of your wisdom and pearls about the entire MD, DO, PhD application process. So my name is Kevin, and I'll be helping moderate this panel today. I'm a first-year MD PhD student at Vanderbilt, so just started a few weeks ago, not too long. And also in the chat box helping us will be Rylan and Eli, who are also both first-year MD PhD students. So for those of us that have questions, some of you had already submitted your questions to us ahead of time when you registered, so we'll ask those. And for the rest of the people, feel free to put them into the chat. We'll make sure we get to as many of them as we can. And so for those of you who may be stepping away or may miss a piece of tonight's meeting, we'll have this recorded. And so we'll send that out afterwards with the link too. And if you have any questions, feel free, as I said, to put them into the chat box. You can also ask us on our Twitter account or by emailing ryan.mortlock@physicianscientists.org. And so I think that's all we have for now. So let's go ahead and actually start and dive into the panel with the first round of questions. Any of our panelists, feel free to jump in throughout. But the first question that a lot of students actually asked was, how did all of you get into medicine and research? And what really drove all of you to pursue an MD, PhD?
I guess I can go first. So in terms of medicine, I don't really have like that stereotypical, oh, this is the moment I knew that I wanted to be a physician. I've just always wanted to be a physician. But I will say that there have been a lot of experiences that I've had that have sort of solidified that I am meant to be a physician. One of which is that my grandmother battled cancer for numerous years, and just seeing some of the things that she went through really made me want to care for others the way that I cared for her. In terms of pursuing a PhD, I did research from sophomore year until I graduated college. It wasn't super extensive, which is one thing I wish I had done, but I really enjoyed the types of questions that I was trying to answer. So during my undergrad years, I worked in a synthetic chemistry lab. My major was biochemistry. So we were looking at perfecting a drug delivery system for cancer therapeutics using targeted therapy. So I really enjoyed that. And I thought, oh, well, why not do both? When I discovered that you could do an MD PhD, I said, well, why not do both? It wasn't until I got into medical school that I actually decided to pursue my PhD in neuroscience after I took a neuroscience course in medical school. And I forgot to mention it, but I'm also interested in neurosurgical oncology. So I want to pursue a residency in neurosurgery. And so when I thought about that, I was like, well, it just makes sense for me to pursue a PhD in neuroscience. So that way I can hopefully do more translational research. But yeah.
I had a very non-traditional path. I thought I was going to be an actress, and I went to NYU and studied at Tisch School of the Arts to be an actress. And then my senior year, I took a class in neuroscience and had a similar experience to Jerome, where I was like, this is the coolest thing. Why would anyone do anything else in the world? Because neuroscience is the best. Senior year of college is kind of the worst time to decide you want to be pre-med. So I started volunteering at a hospital to see what I thought about medicine, and also started doing all of the post-bac coursework, which took 5 years because I was working full-time to pay off student loans, and really loved the research that I was doing, and just decided eventually to do MD PhD. I will say I applied several times MD only because I didn't think I was good enough to apply to an MD PhD program. So one of the points that I hope people take away from today's conversation is, don't take yourself out of the running. Let other people tell you no. Don't tell yourself no. I'm really good at telling myself I'm not good enough and not even putting myself out there. And there are going to be plenty of people to do that. So always put yourself out there.
That's awesome advice. I had kind of a similar introduction into medicine, and then deciding to do a DO PhD. where I graduated from college and honestly like did not really know what I was going to do. And I got really lucky in getting a lab technician job because I had a major in biochemistry, and I'd always been interested in medical school, but I just, hadn't like fully committed. And then through a lot of like personal experience with various doctors, including MD, PhDs, I just saw that I thought having both degrees, like an MD and a PhD, really made you like the best doctor possible because they knew so much more about the science, they knew so much more about the research, and it just brought so many more options to patients. And so really through personal experience, I more so was like, I want to do that. And then for the next few years worked and then, decided to take the MCAT and apply and all that. So it's never too late also, I think, like, if you're not exactly where you want to be with your applications and all your experiences right now, it's never too late to just keep working on that and then apply when you're ready and when you think you could, be a great applicant.
My experience was a little, similar in regards of, of the aha moment where you're willing to do whatever it takes to get in. I was interested in medical school from the jump. In late high school, took anatomy and physiology and realized that was my jam. One of the few people walking into that class smiling every day because I loved memorizing, I loved studying the body. And after I came to the U of A, I had the opportunity to see research firsthand. And I didn't really get it. I didn't quite understand the stress, the tired grad students who taught in the mornings and then stayed up all night in their labs, and the professors who were super excited about their work but not excited about other people's work. I didn't get the whole scene. So after trying on a few different gigs, I realized that it was the research that the professors and the grad students that it was their research that one day in the future would be written in a textbook. And it's that textbook that would then be taught to undergrads like me. And I connected all the dots. So that was when I had the aha moment of, wow, MD PhD would be a really unique experience to be able to combine, you as a physician, you're a clinician, you're one of the, you work as a part of a team. Depending on how you view the medical system, maybe you stay at the top of the team, but with a PhD, you're really equipped to answer questions outside of the medical system, but in a very applied way. So that, I think that was how I kind of came into this mindset.
I think I'm the last person. I think my path probably followed the trend of kind of starting with medicine and moving forward. But I guess where everything started for me was I grew up in a really rural area. There was like 3,000 people in my town. So like, it's not the middle of nowhere, but it's pretty darn close. And growing up in that area, I had no concept of what research was or that it was a career at all. I knew that there was hospitals where doctors, nurses, PAs worked, but that was pretty much all I knew. That and biology teacher was my only concept of what a career in science could be. So I kind of always assumed that I would try to go to medical school. But I remember from a pretty young age being interested in, I was like, well, people who are paralyzed, like, why can't we fix that? Who fixes that? Did neurosurgeons invent surgeries to fix that kind of thing? And that fascinated me. And I wanted to be a neurosurgeon so I could make some new material or invent a surgery. I don't know how I thought that worked, but to fix paralysis and stuff and to fix those problems we hadn't addressed yet. So it wasn't actually until I went to college or when I started touring colleges that I learned that engineers did more than drive trains. I learned what biomedical engineering was and learned this entire field basically existed to do what I wanted to actually do. And I fell in love with biomedical engineering and thought that maybe that's where my career would be. But like both me and my parents didn't really have a good understanding of what a PhD was. And whether you could get a job with that. So I kind of continued preparing for medical school, but as I learned more and more about like, yeah, this whole research thing is a viable career, and maybe that's actually what I prefer, I spent more and more time doing research, but ultimately realized that flasks of cells are just not as personable and talkative as real people, and that what I did love, the only thing that I couldn't get out of my research was conversations with people, especially the long-term relationships, especially about the hard stuff. And after spending a couple months shadowing in hematology oncology, I realized that I wanted that. So while I think my scientific satisfaction comes entirely from my research, I love my research more than anything. I also can't part with the conversation side of things. And medicine is also really fascinating. But yeah, so that's how I kind of decided, got to do both.
Excellent. Thank you all. It's really cool hearing all of your stories, how some of you took the more traditional path and some of you complete this. That's super neat to hear both sides of that story. We have someone who put a question into the chat, and I think, yeah, Jerome's asking if that's for everyone. So in the meanwhile, as we sort that out, we have another question somebody else had submitted earlier as they registered. So we're currently in the thick of application cycle. A lot of people are, I'm sure as many of you remember, a lot of fun times. So people are asking, and wondering, what was probably the biggest hardship you guys faced through the application process, and what's something about the process that all of you wish you had known before applying, or maybe while you were applying for the cycle there?
Okay, I have something that immediately comes to mind. So this application cycle is kind of a challenge to your confidence and belief in yourself in little ways. At least that's how I felt going through it, where you're like, am I going to be good enough? I'm not good enough. Like, do I shoot my shot? Am I being too cocky? Like, like kind of, and I think that like I really didn't believe in myself at all, and like kind of was just not going to apply to anything other than my undergraduate until the academic advisors were like, maybe you should pick some few more schools. And I'm like, by the way, why don't you look at Columbia? Because that's like the research that you dream of doing. They have a program that does exactly what you're looking for. And I was like, no, I'll never, I assumed automatically that I would never get in there. And there was Columbia and one other school that the research was just beyond my wildest dreams. And I ended up applying to Columbia because it happened to be the first secondary I got back, and so it was the first one I submitted. And I just kind of was like, you know what, I'll never get in here, but it would mean the world to me to meet this particular researcher, and that's all I want. And I was just hoping for the interview and assumed that would be it. And then somebody came along, and I went to a panel kind of like this, except it was like at my undergraduate, and I met someone who had left the school and was then in like their 7th year of their MD PhD. And they came back and they were talking about things, and they were like, yeah, it's incredibly competitive. You'll probably never get in unless you have a first author paper coming out of undergraduate. I had one, and so therefore I got in. My program director says that they don't even look at people who don't have first author papers coming out of undergraduate. And I was like, I didn't have any papers, and like my greatest hope at getting on a paper was 8th author. And just so you know, I still don't have any papers. And that really disheartened me. And I had gotten these secondaries back from other schools that I dreamed of going to, but I didn't submit them because I was like, I don't have a chance, and it worked out well in the end because I think that I couldn't be happier with where I am and the person who I'll end up working for. But don't let anyone do that to you, no matter what it's publications, anything. Like, this is not the time to listen to external influences who may prematurely disqualify you, because this is the time to shoot your shot, and you are worthy. You're going to feel unworthy. It does it to all of us, but no matter whatever you're thinking, no matter what you may deep down believe, put your fears aside for now and shoot your shot, because it can be very worth it. And even if it doesn't work out this time, it doesn't have to work out the first time either. So That's what I wanted to say.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Maria. So I had a really non-traditional route. One of the things I wish I would have known is that it's okay to be a non-traditional student and to take the time to beef up your application if need be. So I started applying to medical school during my senior year of undergrad, took the MCAT, got an okay score on the old scoring system and was like, I'm just going to do it. But I was very naive and I was like, I'm only going to apply to places where I want to live. I want to get out of the South and I want to spread my wings and go. I don't recommend that. You need to be very realistic. And what I mean by that is look at the stats of where you are applying and see where you measure. Like Maria sort of mentioned, like you can definitely have those where you're shooting for the stars and you can land on the moon, but you want to be realistic. And I definitely wasn't. So my first time that I applied to medical school, I did not get in. I got 3 interviews and I was waitlisted, I believe, at my home institution and rejected everywhere else. So I was forced to take a gap year. And it was honestly one of the best experiences because when I was in undergrad, I was a double major for 2.5 years in biomedical engineering and biochemistry. So I was very burnt out. And I do not think that I would be doing as well as I have been if I had gone into medical school right out of college. So I applied the second time. I was more realistic and I looked at the metrics that certain schools requested and then what I had, and I planned accordingly. I obviously had some of my dream schools, and some of them were in places where I hoped to live, but there were others that were more realistic. I applied again, and I was waitlisted at my current institution, so Meharry Medical College, and I was rejected everywhere else. So I was already gearing up to have to possibly take the MCAT again and do a better score. So I was starting to study. And then May 12th of 2015, I got my acceptance. And within 2 weeks, I quit my job. I moved to Nashville and I started medical school. And I say all of that just to say, first of all, it's okay. It's okay for you to take the time you need to create this holistic application and make sure that you are a strong applicant. Because moving forward, that's what you're going to be doing for the remainder of your life, whether it's applying to grants and making sure that your bio sketch accurately reflects who you are, or when you talk about applying to residency and making sure that that application is well suited. So that would be one thing. And I guess the only other thing, and I really think, and I think that Maria touched on it briefly, was I'm going to use the term imposter syndrome, but not feeling like you're good enough. Know that you are. And I think that Molly also mentioned it, and the fact, like, don't count yourself out, let someone else do that, because you're going to get plenty of no's throughout this career that you may choose to go down. And there's no need for you to like let yourself down, which I struggle with it all the time, but.
I guess I know people have already submitted primary applications and are probably in the midst of secondary applications. So in terms of advice, I think for this part of the process, you're going to be interviewing, you're going to be looking at places. And I think it's really important to realize you're interviewing the schools as much as they're interviewing you. I think we all go into it like, oh, they're judging me, or they're trying to figure out if I'm a good fit. You're also trying to figure out if schools are a good fit for you. And so own that and go in with that confidence that you're interviewing them, you're getting a sense of them. And also think about one of the things I thought about when I was applying to programs is, and I'm going to use a baseball term because I like baseball, but think about how deep the bench is. So things happen, you do med school and then you start your research program. And you're interviewing a year before you even start. So if a training grant goes away or someone doesn't get an R01 or someone leaves the institution, then, and you only have 1 or 2 researchers you want to work with, then a lot can change. So have a list of people that you want to work with at each program, just so that you know you're going to be happy there no matter what happens.
Excellent. Speaking about interviews, for the sake of time, we'll move on to another question someone had asked in the chat was, if any of you remember back to your interview season, how did some of you prepare for interviews? And did you find any questions did you find valuable in asking faculty or current students during interviews? I know it may have been a little while since some of you gone through the interview process, but any tips or tricks for us there that we can maybe learn from?
I don't know if everyone else had the same experience, but at least when interviewing for the more like PhD side of things, because at MSU we have to interview for both the medical school and the PhD program and the combined. So at least when I was interviewing for the PhD and the combined, I think just talking to people about research, like showing that you're interested, showing that you've looked into what they've done and that you think this is cool and you have maybe a question about what they did here or why. I think that really shows like a lot of initiative and exactly what they're looking for in students. And then for the medical side, I honestly really prepared for it very similar to like a job that you like really want, like a dream career or something. I guess that's what it is, but dream job, just like practice, honestly. At least that helped me just to you know, prepare in advance like what points you really want to get across and how you want to make yourself, how you want to put your best foot forward and like show yourself the way you want to be seen, I guess.
I would agree with all that. And in my experience, finding family members, although you may have to be a little bit more cautious with something like that, maybe like your twice removed cousin, like someone who's far enough away from your direct life to be able to evaluate your tone and the rate at which you're speaking and, you know, all the things that go into being a good interviewee is helpful. In my case, I asked one of the deans of the Honors College to help me both with writing statements and also interviewing, because someone in that position has to meet a lot of new people and has to, understands the subtleties of being a good interviewer and a good interviewee. So finding those in your life, whether it's through academia, through your lab, maybe your PI or one of your PI's colleagues, family members, get as many people to look at statements and to hear you speak about your research and your passion and your interests, because that will help you not only convince yourself that you're actually doing it, you're actually going to interview, you're saying the right things, but you'll get valuable feedback from those who want to see you succeed.
I agree. I love everything that's been said so far and agree with a lot of it. I think, well, all of it. I think another good thing is if you don't necessarily have easy access to someone who you think would be good to practice with, you can interview and then record yourself and watch yourself back. You've probably heard that one before, but it's great to see if you have any nervous habits and what your tone is, if you sound too sing-songy or, when you get nervous or something like that. I actually was thinking a lot about this because for a friend of mine who's interviewing now or going to be interviewing soon for just MD programs, thinking back, I think that the most helpful thing I did for myself was this is like, I feel like it's cheating a little bit, but what I did before every interview was I typed up lists of questions, I printed them off and I folded them and I put them in my purse. And in between, because I knew when I get nervous, I blank. And in between each interview, I would go to the bathroom or like go to the water fountain or something, check on my list on my purse, and I usually had I wrote out. I had a separate list of questions, so like generic school questions for the med school interviews because they're like pretty standard. They're pretty they're pretty similar from school to school. And then I had like the top 5 questions I wanted to ask each researcher I interviewed with. And I think that was really helpful because there's just a lot of times where they're like, any questions? So what more can I tell you about our school? You know, and you're like, and you do want to have an answer for those times. It's okay if you don't. It's okay to say like, you know, I think I've had my most important concerns addressed today. We talked, and then I would follow that up with like, just so they know you're not bluffing. I would follow that up with say like, I had a great conversation with so-and-so about this, you know, that's one of the things I've really liked about the school so far. And that way you can show like, yeah, I have been like engaging and interested and stuff like that. But honestly, it feels like cheating, but that is what I would recommend to do. And sometimes I separated them by list. I had one sheet for questions for current students, one sheet for questions for administrators of the medical school, and one sheet per interviewer with my research specific questions and then my program or department questions and stuff.
If I could double dip, I realized I already spoke, but something came to mind that I wanted to make sure I said. I think it's important to know exactly what you're bringing to the table, consistent with what both Molly and Jerome and everybody have been saying. Understand your strengths and be aware of your weaknesses. Don't let them hold you back from fully immersing yourself in the process. But for example, if research was a prominent part, which if you're applying MD or DO PhD likely is, even if you don't have a first author publication, if you are on an abstract, you should be able to talk about the details of that study in a sufficient enough way that the interviewer or panel interviewers appreciate you were integral in that study, or you learned a lot, or whatever the case may be. There was some sort of technical, intellectual contribution to that study. And just knowing the details of your study does not mean you have to understand the entire field. So if the interview gets to a point where they're asking you questions about things you don't know yet or don't understand, that's okay. It's, in my opinion, it's likely that they're trying to assess that you are willing to acknowledge you don't know everything. So it goes hand in hand that you want to know what you've done, but we're all at the beginning of this lifelong career journey. So there should come a point where you say, I don't know, but I'm very curious on what you're saying and I'm willing to look it up, something to that effect. So.
Excellent. So in the next 20 minutes or so, a few more questions that people have put in. And for those people who joined late, I know we had some technical issues. Don't worry, this is all recorded. So we'll make sure we send this out afterwards. And if you have any more questions, feel free to put them into the chat or message them directly to Ryland or Eli, and we'll make sure we get to them. But someone else earlier had asked, for those of you who have been on the student side of admissions or have actually interviewed candidates, what are some things that help make those applicants stand out, and any advice you'd give them? So I'm not sure if any of you have actually been on the admission side, if you can give us any tips for people applying there.
I interview OHSU's MMIs, and I've done interviewing for MMI the past 2 years. And what's been really standing out to me is who comes in with a canned response to those questions based on, I guess, either looking online or other places, and then who actually reads the question and then answers it. And we have a rubric, and we're looking for people who are responding to the prompt and fully responding to the prompt that they're given. And I see a lot of students who try to take the prompt and and try to read into what we're getting at and say, I think this is the tension between X and Y, and these are the principles that I would apply. And that's not what they're trying to do. They want you to respond to the prompt that you're given. So I would just keep that in mind. And the great thing with MMIs is you have a ton of them. So if one of them goes poorly, let it go. Like, wash your hands, wash that off, and know that we don't talk to each other, and it's going to get averaged together. And so if you have a bad one or a bad couple of them, it's not going to hurt you. And just enjoy them, and enjoy the conversation with the person that's doing with the person that's on the other side.
To a certain extent, I think MMIs are to the interviewee's advantage because you get in front of more people who can see you shine in different areas, and who have different skill sets and different, whatever you want to call it, different personalities. But having gone through the MMI process myself when I applied, and also being on the interviewer side, I can appreciate how disorienting different MMI questions can be because you're covering a broad range of topics. I would say as an interviewee, be sure to give yourself enough time, like Molly said, to understand what the prompt is asking. And something that I tried to practice myself, and I notice when other students do that, is if you need a moment to reevaluate where you're taking the MMI conversation, don't be afraid to pause. Don't be afraid to just sit there and ponder to yourself and ask for a moment to clarify your thoughts. All of that shows self-control and that you're aware of what's going on and you're not just letting your emotions get the best of you. So it's a great sign of intellectual and emotional maturity.
I would also add, outside of when you're truly interviewing, like one-on-one with people or in groups, just be cognizant of who you're meeting and that and I'm sure you guys all would be, but be respectful and be kind, because I know even though I don't interview people directly, I interact with like all the students that come through, and the program directors always ask me for my feedback on them too. So even though these people, I'm not really interviewing them, I'm kind of getting to know them. So like, I like seeing, genuine people, kind people. Yeah, honestly, just like be nice to other people you meet, which I'm sure you all will be.
Yeah, I would also add, and this is one of the things that I like very much struggled with during my interviewing, with being comfortable with yourself, especially if you identify as a marginalized group. You already have to struggle with feeling like the other. And then depending on how many of those marginalized groups that you identify with, you may feel that even more. And so for me, when I was interviewing, I did not like MMIs. They made me very uncomfortable. I had to meet new people. And because some of the schools where I interviewed were in the South, I just knew that my personality, my inflections, everything was going to be critiqued and people would look down upon me, and that made me very self-conscious. So I was the type of person where I just sort of went in a shell, and I only spoke unless spoken to, and that's very detrimental because obviously you don't want to be disrespectful and overpower everyone when you were interviewing, but if the opportunity presents itself, you definitely do want to talk during MMIs. So I would say that just know that you've already gotten the interview, and that's the hardest part. So then the next thing is telling them why they need to accept you, because I don't want to say you've gotten like a conditional acceptance, because that's not what it is, but you have somewhat like shown them that you could be a great fit for their program. Now tell them why you are a great fit. And you have to have confidence to do that. And I know that that's a lot easier said than done, but I really wish that I had done that. And I think that may have, increased the number of programs that I had gotten interviews for, as well as acceptances for.
Hey, sorry to to add like a millionth response, but I didn't have to go through MMIs, and we don't do them here, but I'm not like senior enough in the program to directly interview people, but I do host most of the interview events, and I often host interviewees as like a student host. And in addition, like I have a good deal of interview experience for a program that I used to like interview for in undergrad. We had I was part of an organization that ran like a training camp that was like a little research experience, and we interviewed a lot of people. And I realized interviewing people there, where we just had to like pick 20 out of 200 people, that it's really hard to do that. But the differentiating factor is usually passion, and it doesn't necessarily have to be passion about the direct topic at hand. Personally, this might just be my bias or what I would like to see if I were an interviewer, but in my experience, like it's much easier to connect with an interviewee who shows excitement, no matter what that's about. Like I've had some great interviews about scientific topics, and I've had, or like ones that I enjoyed. And I don't know that they necessarily went great for me, but but I enjoyed them. And but you know, and then also ones about like completely irrelevant personal things, including like just church, which is something that was important to me, that an interviewer brought up, and I was surprised. I was like, oh, I thought we weren't supposed to talk about that. But I think that like when I host students and stuff too, I don't really get a warm fuzzy feeling when I think I try to be forgiving and understanding, but some people like don't talk to me at all when I'm hosting them in my house, and they're just kind of like on their computer or on their phone or talking to them. I'm like, I get it, you're nervous. But then like other people get excited and they tell me about the basketball team, and I don't watch basketball at all. and they're much more personable people. And I think like keep in mind too, in medicine, that being personable is like a positive quality, because you have to get along with a lot of people, which are patients. Yeah, I mean, like if you're a quiet person, that's okay. If you're not a super big conversation starter, perfectly fine. But I would say just don't feel like you have to hold anything back, because it's so much easier to like and to get along with people when you know what their personality is, you know what they care about, rather than just being like, I don't know, I'm trying to figure it out. But yeah, and that can also be showcased through you talking to the other candidates in the room. Like I think if an interviewer, when I walk in to a group of the interviewees and I see like 4 people having a great conversation and kind of laughing along, it like reflects positively in general, because it's like, oh, like these are fun people to get along with, getting along. But it's also okay if you're, I don't let that discourage you if you're like more going to be the quiet person in the room. But yeah, I would just say don't be afraid to kind of let it loose and show your personality, show your excitement, no matter what that's about, to interviewees, interviewers, student hosts, everything.
Wonderful. Thank you all. For the sake of time, this might be the final question, but we'll see where this brings us. But someone else earlier had also asked, maybe like after the interview process, what communication looked like with the programs you had interviewed with? Do any of you remember? Did you like write to them right afterwards? And we'll have a separate session later on the site, go exactly what like the wait list on that looks like. But there were some several people asking earlier about like what post-interview looked like. And if any of you had advice for that.
Outside of radio silence, in my experience, there wasn't much communication in the post-interview phase. I was fortunate enough to have a paper accepted. So for the schools that allowed it, I sent in a little update. I forget the exact term, but basically letting them know that this paper that was listed as like under review on my CV or whatever is my resume had subsequently been accepted. And did it make a difference? It's hard to say, but I just had, I saw it was an option, and I would have regretted it if I didn't try to do something. So I submitted that in, but in the end, it's a lot of waiting, patient waiting. And yeah, regardless of the outcome, you have gone through an experience that a lot of people don't have the opportunity to go through. And you can take away a lot of powerful things from going through the interview process. So no matter if it's a rejection or an acceptance, you've still won in that sense.
Yeah, I would have to mirror what Ike said. I didn't even know that that was a possibility, to message programs or email programs after the fact. Keep in mind, I interviewed in 2014 and 2015, so that's like almost 10 years ago. So I think that things may have changed, and I really hope that they do. I think that it's more like unofficially accepted for you to do that, like during your residency interviews, just to show interest. I think in terms of medical school, you have to think that they get thousands of applications. And so having to field thousands of responses like after your interview is just going to be difficult. But maybe that'll change. I don't know.
I had a program coordinator at one of my schools mention at the end of the day that at the end of the 2-day interview process, that some of the people I'd met with thought I would be a really good fit and that if I was interested in that program, I should be very explicit about it in a follow-up email that was sent. And she was like, that you will send in the next 12 hours. And so if someone gives you that much of a hint and you genuinely want to go to that program, send that email. Most programs don't accept follow-up. I found a lot of them will be really clear about what communication they accept and what form they accept it in. So some will say, we'll accept update letters until you've interviewed. Some will say, we'll accept update letters until this date. So just pay attention.
I guess going back even a little bit now, like pre-interview, someone had asked what the experience waiting for interview invites was like coming out. Did all of you, was there like a huge delay from like when you submitted secondaries or like invitations start rolling out? Do any of you remember what that whole experience was? So I remember it being super stressful for me last year. I was like, when is this ever going to happen? Maybe if some of you could speak to kind of that waiting process.
Yeah, I just saw what Molly put in the chat, but I got mine like super late. I think I submitted what you can submit in September, and they have to all be in. Your secondaries have to be in October, or maybe that's your primaries. I can't remember. It's been years since I've done this, but like I said, there are some that I was able to get a whole bunch of secondaries. I completed all my secondaries, and then I only got like 2 or 3 interviews per season, and a lot of those happened like before the turn of the year. So like between October and December. And then there was that huge waiting game of we're getting closer and closer to a new academic year. Am I going to be a medical student? And as I stated, my first year, the answer was no, I will not be. So really had to reevaluate my life and see what that gap year was like. But then for my second one, like I said, my school does what's known as a mini academic program for success, which is basically where you do a pass-fail program in the summer that sort of allows you to dip your toe into medical school coursework before you actually start having to take classes for letter grades. So when I got my acceptance, that was less than a week away. Or excuse me, a month away. So I had a lot to do within that month for me to go, because obviously I wanted to be a medical student. I want to be a physician. So when I got my acceptance, I was like, well, here we go. It's time to start this process. So like I said, I put in my 2 weeks notice that day. And then 2 weeks after that, I quit and I moved to Nashville. And then I used 2 weeks, about 10 days to 2 weeks, to give myself an opportunity to grow accustomed to the city, to see how long it would take me to commute from where I was staying to the campus, especially during rush hour. So that was like for me. And then I also like the question that Nina posted. So I would like to just like voice that for everyone really quickly. Nina asked, is it safe to discuss struggles with mental health during an interview or application? And I think Molly really touched on this very well. It's a double-edged sword. You have to choose what is important to you. And I was recently an organizer for a panel for LGBTQI plus identifying students that are entering the match. And you have to decide what your identity is and how important it is for you to let that be known. During that panel, one of the physicians that was on the call said they actually preferred to wait to let their interviewers know that they identified as LGBTQ, so that way they could see their guttural reaction to see how responsive or respective they would be to their identity and how supportive they could be. And so I think the same thing could be said for this. You can definitely include it in your applications if that is a core part of who you are and you want to ensure that you are going to be supported. But another way that you could do that is do it during an interview and let them know that you want to make sure that you feel supported throughout your time in medical school. Because I think we all can attest to doing an MD PhD program is very, very stressful. And you are going to have some really great highs, but you are going to have some abysmal lows. And if you want to ensure that your mental well-being is paramount for your institution, then you may want to let them know that up front. I don't say that you need to go super in depth and like go into your life story, but you can say that, you know, you struggle with certain things and you want to know what resources are available to you to ensure that you were able to matriculate throughout their program. Sorry about that, Kevin.
No, I'm very glad you touched that. If anyone else wanted to maybe add in anything regarding that question, so that's a very good question. Wonderful. Well, just for this, I know we started a little bit late today, but in order to respect everyone's time, I'm sure everyone, all our panelists and everyone else here is super busy. Let's start wrapping up here. So I just want to thank everyone for joining our Q&A session today with our amazing current students. Of course, I want to thank our panelists for all their time, all the participants who came to this, who got that email, the last minute Zoom link switch. And also a lot of people here at APSA, including the APSA Diversity Ad Hoc Committee, our PR Committee, our Partnerships Committee, Gabby, APSA Leadership, everyone who helped put these sessions together to make sure that all of our applicants were able to receive word of this. We're currently in the process of planning our entire calendar for the upcoming interactive session to best support applicants throughout this application cycle. So please stay tuned via social media, check out our Twitter, and look out for our emails. Lastly, before we end, we're going to post a link in the chat, which is an opportunity for everyone here, as well as the panelists, to help with a current study about first-generation physician scientists. The purpose of this study is to better understand experiences of physician scientist trainees who identify as first generations, either first generation family to complete a four-year college degree, or the first in their family to pursue a graduate degree throughout the various stages of training. So whether or not you're interested in pursuing an MD, DO, PhD, or currently pursuing this degree track, we really appreciate it if you could help us fill out the survey, and we will put that link in right now. Eli actually will help us put that in there. But otherwise, other than that, thank you all for coming very much to this. We will send out the recording for everyone who maybe stepped in late or couldn't make it. But once again, thank you all for doing this. This is very helpful, and I learned a lot too myself. So.